But before coming here, most recently, I was living in Beijing, and I enjoyed it there. I had a good job at a magazine, but when Xi Jinping became the leader, I felt that the environment was becoming a little more hostile towards foreigners. I felt that air pollution was not good for my long-term health as well, and I felt like that foreigners are being less welcomed than before. My name is Keoni Everington. I'm from the US, and I work as a journalist at Taiwan News. It's a Taiwanese local news agency that has been around since 1949, and it was purchased by Imei in the 1990s. So it's owned by the large food company, but basically we're quite independent in terms of our editorial stance and everything. We just cover the news.
Okay. Why do you choose to come to Taiwan?
Well, I wanted to use my Mandarin skills because I studied Mandarin for many years, and actually I came here once before in the 90s. But before coming here, most recently I was living in Beijing, and I enjoyed it there. I had a good job at a magazine, but when Xi Jinping became the leader, I felt that the environment was becoming a little more hostile towards foreigners. I felt that air pollution was not good for my long-term health as well, and I felt like that foreigners are being less welcomed than before. So that's why I decided to come to Taiwan and try to develop my skills here and work in media.
Journalists tend to know a lot about wherever they are. What's your take on this China-Taiwan tension? Is it something that foreigners have to worry about?
Mostly what I've gathered is that China is not really going to make a, let's say, invasion in the immediate near future. But we don't know for 100% sure because it's all down to Xi Jinping. It's up to him. But like this talk of the 2027 deadline for them to invade, I've talked to a lot of experts who said that it's not really set like that. It's just, okay, it might be a milestone in terms of like capability, but that's not really necessarily a milestone for really invading. What we're just gonna see is just what we've been seeing, which is the gray zone tactics, where they just try to intimidate Taiwan, but without actually touching off a war. Xi Jinping himself, he denied there's a 2027 deadline. He's very agitated about that. And Tsai Ing-wen said that they have too many problems of their own right now to handle a war. And I think they're both right. I think there's, it's a lot of bluster, and Taiwanese are very used to that. And so that's why you don't see Taiwanese really reacting to this stuff. And the Taiwanese government knows that as long as they don't really react much to it, the Chinese government doesn't have much to work with in terms of justifying any kind of serious military action. They're going to do like salami slicing tactics and gray zone tactics where they try to pressure Taiwan and squeeze Taiwan, because what she really wants is just to coerce Taiwan into a peaceful annexation. The real word is annexation. The word they use in Chinese is 统一, means unify. But in the English, they translate it as reunify, which is completely incorrect because Taiwan, the Republic of China was never part of the People's Republic of China. So that's a falsehood, yeah.
Taiwan is known to be one of the democratic countries around. How is freedom of speech here in Taiwan as a journalist?
It's a huge difference from when I was in China, because I worked at a magazine there, and we had a long list of taboo topics, including Taiwan. we couldn't really say much about Taiwan. We definitely couldn't use the word Formosa. So here in Taiwan, there's a lot less in terms of censorship. Of course, there's always some degree of censorship, but it's much, much less than in China, and it's more comparable to Western countries like the US.
What are some of these taboo topics in Taiwan that you can't talk about?
They discourage us, I say the police discourage us from listing the full name of a suspect before they've been convicted of a crime. And I want to say that we do that with both foreigners and Taiwanese.
Is there any biased treatment between how the media treats foreign cases compared to Taiwanese?
I would say that there's a little bit because this is a hot issue of debate among the foreign community here, and I understand their perspective. And there's two sides to the story because, I think I want to help educate foreigners on the laws here that we need to respect, but at the same time, we don't want to discriminate against people because simply because they are a foreigner. So that's a difficult balance to strike. And Taiwanese media sometimes can overhype the fact that they're a foreigner and make the story a story simply because they are a foreigner. We've been accused of favoring Taiwanese, like only using their surname and then giving the whole name for foreigners. That's not true. We do the same thing. We treat both equally. We tried our best to treat both equally. And in the case of foreigners, if it's a very unusual last name, then we would use the first name. Whichever is the most common, so that you couldn't really pinpoint a specific individual, that's what we're going to use when it comes to Westerners.
Okay.
But at the same time, trying to help educate foreigners on the differences in the laws here between with Western countries. So, for example, defamation law is still strong here. In the West, you have more freedom to curse at someone or something, and it's not a illegal act. And also, for example, marijuana, smoking it or selling it or that kind of thing, in some Western countries is legal or semi-legal, but here it's still strictly illegal. So that's another example where we are trying to inform the public. That's our goal, is to inform the public and provide information that they find useful.
Had worked in China, now working in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the differences in working environment compared to these countries?
Foreigners within 6 months can get the public health insurance, which is wonderful here. It's very affordable. But in China, there's nothing like that for foreigners at all. So your company needs to pay some sort of international insurance program for you. The quality of the care is not as good in the Chinese hospitals. Here, a lot of the doctors trained in the U.S., and they have medical degrees from the U.S., and almost always speak fluent English. Mm-hmm. Whereas in China, that's a lot of times they don't necessarily speak English, or we're not necessarily Western trained. So that's a big thing. Another thing is visa, the work visa situation. In China, it's much more difficult and cumbersome to obtain a work visa, where here it's a more transparent and clear process to obtain the various visas, and also to obtain permanent residency. There's a clear path to permanent residency. It only takes 5 years, whereas it's really nothing like that in China.
All these you've mentioned, seems like living in Taiwan as a foreigner is kind of very favorable, but I've had so many people who claim that Taiwan isn't actually open to foreigners. It's not very favorable to foreigners to live and work here.
That's exaggerated. Having lived in China, I find it much easier, much more friendly to foreigners here than in China. In China there can be some actual hostility, and that comes down from the government, and it infects the local people, who are generally kind, but the news, the politics and everything kind of gets into them, and they become feeling a little bit more hostile. But with Taiwan, there's a very straight path to, like I said, healthcare and work visas or study visas. But yes, I know what they're talking about. They're talking about the difficulties with things like banking. It's very cumbersome. Another thing is there's not a path to citizenship is really difficult and frustrating. If you wanted to become a citizen, an actual citizen of Taiwan, you have to generally relinquish your own citizenship. And so anybody from like a well-developed first world country, they are reluctant to do that. Now they have an exception, but the exception is really difficult to achieve. You have to be almost like a superhuman, because you have to have advanced degrees, you have to have published books, you have to have won prestigious awards and demonstrated major contributions to Taiwan. So The bar is very high. Very, very difficult to achieve dual citizenship here. You have to go through 2 different government agencies, and they both have to agree. So out of 700,000 foreigners, only 100 or 200 actually make the cut, which is just, that's never going to get what Taiwan needs. They suffer from a lack of, international talent, and that's not going to get you there. So this is what people are talking about when they complain about making it difficult for foreigners. Whereas there's other countries that are more open than Taiwan. They do make it easier to become citizens. And that's something that Taiwan needs to definitely improve, for sure.
What advice would you give to someone who wishes to come to Taiwan?
It's a great place. There's a lot of good things about Taiwan. I think it's very important. Personally, I think it's very important to learn the language, try to learn the language, because it's going to make your life a lot easier and you're going to get a lot more out of your experience in Taiwan. You need to get to know local people quickly, make some good, strong contacts here as soon as you can to help you with the very basic things that you're going to need.
Living in America and had lived in China and now living in Taiwan, what stands out most about Taiwan?
It's just so amazingly convenient here compared to living in the US, which is a car culture where anything we need to do, we need to drive large distances. But in my neighborhood here in Zhongshan District, within just a 5-minute walk, I have my dentist, my doctor, my barber, my chiropractor. Everything is like super close. There's multiple 7-Elevens and Family Marts. There's grocery stores. There's several little parks. So that I'm super spoiled. Lots and lots of restaurants. And so, there's dry cleaners and tailors and pretty much anything you need is in and there's this store down the street from me that sells everything. I'm super spoiled by that. I don't even need to leave my district much because I pretty much have everything I need here. And then if I want to leave, there's the MRT. And so the MRT is incredibly convenient as well. And then there's a wonderful bullet train that you can go from one end of the island to the other in like 2 hours at the most, something like that. And so that's the big difference when I go back to the US. I wish I had a bullet train because there's states are so big, like I need to travel from one end of North Carolina to the other. Or if I wanted to go to Tennessee from South Carolina or something, it's a horrific, huge, long drive. Everybody here feels, I'm saying Westerners and foreigners, when they come here, they find it's a lot safer than their own home countries. The US is actually statistically not as dangerous as it seems, but there are neighborhoods that are extremely dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, and foreign tourists in the US accidentally wander into these neighborhoods and sometimes have problems. Whereas in Taiwan, it's not going to be like that. You could be a tourist and pretty much wander into any place, and you're not going to have to worry about getting kidnapped or robbed or anything like that. It's incredibly safe here. There is crime, but it's at a much, much lower level because you have cameras everywhere around Taiwan. So I would say it's a good and bad thing. The good part is that the criminals get quickly caught here. You can't get away with anything here, so it's safe. But at the same time, you're being watched all the time. But fortunately, it doesn't really have any negative consequences if you're not breaking any laws. In the U.S., there's not much in the way of that kind of surveillance. So people get away with all kind of crime all the time,
Do you have anything else to tell Taiwanese people?
Because I really enjoy living in Taiwan. I'm very thankful for all the great Taiwanese people I met. They're incredibly friendly people, and I think they should take pride in their country and keep moving forward, keep doing what they're doing. Don't be intimidated by China, and keep building the country stronger and stronger, whether it's with infrastructure or through the military. And I think as long as Taiwan keeps showing confidence and building its relationship with bigger countries, I think Taiwan's going to be fine. And I think there's a bright future for Taiwan.